So let me bring in Republican Senator Mike Braun from Indiana. He joins me after just finishing up that vote. And I want to talk about coronavirus relief in a minute, but I want to talk to you about what the president said in these Woodward tapes. I assume at this point you have at least heard the tapes there. The president intentionally saying he downplayed the virus for the public. In hindsight, that looks like a terrible decision, and it doesn't look pretty well thought out, even when you look at it through the March eyes.
So when you look at the most recent revelation through the Woodward book, let's focus on the question itself. And, you know, I think the whole COVID navigation has been so hyped up. I try to cut to the chase in terms of what I think has been good about what the president has done. I also think that when you are, you know, constantly out, you know, saying things on media, you're going to have to be accountable for it. When it comes to downplaying it, not wanting to create a panic, I personally don't think that's going to probably create as much of a dust-up as maybe some might think. I do think in general that there is an accumulation from when you're having to maybe explain what you've said that takes away from the essence of what you're trying to do. I'll cite this particularly. When it comes to the two most important things, arriving at a vaccine, coming up with therapeutics, have we done that in a way that is quicker and it'll be better? I think unequivocally. I come from Main Street, entrepreneurial world. I think if we had had a different dynamic in place, let's just say Obama, Biden, Biden, Harris, we would have relied more on bureaucracy. I've always said pay attention to the experts, but don't let them dictate how you navigate through it. And I think a lot of things have been done well. I think when you look at what Birx and Fauci said back in late February, early March, that the best case scenario would be 150 to 200,000 fatalities, as bad as that sounds, they're on record of saying it, and that's basically where we are. I look at those issues, not what's being interpreted through tabloids, books, because let's face it, there's been a cascade and a litany of that from the Mueller report to impeachment to COVID and a host of other issues. And you start to lose the marginal benefit or value of whatever that next thing might be.
Senator, I guess the hard part for me is to understand how any part of this response can be seen as a positive when you compare our outcomes to South Korea, to Germany, to France, to Spain, to Italy. We can go down the line. When you compare us to the rest of the Western world, okay? I'm not even talking about developing countries or third world countries. It is, and frankly, we don't know if we're on the right track on a vaccine yet. I hope you're right on this, but I guess I'm pushing back on that is because what part of this response has been a positive? We're all still shut in our houses. We can't go to sporting events 6 months later. In other countries, you can.
Well, let's look at it this way. You also got to look at, well, what would have happened otherwise? And of course, we don't know that. The closest example that we can get to where there was that heavy emphasis on early shutdown comprehensively, and probably they had no other option, would have been in New York and New Jersey. And they constitute nearly a quarter of the statistics. And then you've got someone like Governor Cuomo that tries to spin that in a way that's been positive. So I don't think you can just focus on what Trump has done. What I can see that's been done is I think we're going to arrive at a solution to this quicker than we taken another approach. And it also begs the question, you do not know what the consequences would have been of an alternative plan, because that's theoretical. This is the one we're dealing with.
I want to talk about the fact that we're farther away on coronavirus relief. I'm trying to understand what you guys did in the Senate today. The president earlier this week said, or at least the president's negotiators said they had upped the number to $1.5 trillion in their negotiations. What is it that you guys thought you were going to accomplish in the Senate today that seemed to have no bearing on what the White House and Democrats were negotiating?
Well, you know, some things do get to where you've got to put a marker out there. And I can tell you among a good portion of Republicans, we were looking at what did we do right with the CARES Act? Was there something we could repurpose? Wanted to focus in on schools, healthcare, those businesses that were left out in the first round. And to be honest, I don't think it adds up to $1 trillion, especially 1.5 or 3.3. So I think here we at least put something on the floor to vote for. And why couldn't at least one Democrat have voted for it? And then worked on something additional and at least got something done. I think it's insulting to some of us that know how measured and how targeted this was and what we just voted on today to say that it has no value. It's not going to be something that's going to work if you want the Pelosi package, but that's not going to work either for all the reasons I don't need to go into.
Right, but your leadership didn't participate in any negotiations. Do you feel as if you were let down on that front? I mean, he has not been involved with the White House or with congressional Democrats. And I'm referring to Senator McConnell.
Yeah, and I think he puts it pretty easy to understand. We'll have to get something that our own conference can agree to. We then need 7 Democrats, theoretically, in the Senate. Then you'd have to get the House to vote on it, and then President Trump sign it. So there was a lot of probably nothing going to happen when you've got to jump 3 hurdles so high. Especially
when it's so close to November in a presidential election year. Senator Mike Braun, Republican from Indiana, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective. Not many of your colleagues do come on. You usually do, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chuck.